It's My Nerd World and Depeche Mode, the podcast. On this week's episode, tragedy strikes close to home for Depeche Mode again. Is a Memento Mori Deluxe box set coming soon, including those 4 unreleased tracks, live in Hamburg Blu-ray on the way, plus your listener feedback.
Hello, this is Martin Gore from Depeche Mode.
Hi, this is Dave Gahan from Depeche Mode, and you are listening to
My Nerd World.
It is My Nerd World, and welcome to it. Depeche Mode, the podcast, and I'm your host, Jon Justice. Thank you so much for checking out another episode devoted to my favorite band and yours, and the best band on the face of the planet. I have some exciting news to share on the show this week. First off, we have to begin with a bit of unfortunate and tragic news to strike close to home again for Depeche Mode. Tragic loss as Erasure star Vince Clarke's wife, Tracy, 53, dies after her 2-year cancer battle. Bandmate Andy Bell leads the tributes in the wake of the devastating news. Depeche Mode and Erasure star Vince Clarke's wife, Tracy Hurley Martin, has passed away from stomach cancer. Erasure co-founder Andy Bell announced the news on social media earlier this week, writing, "There are no words. My heart, my soul, and all of my love goes to Vincent and Oscar, Tanya, Michael, and Isabel, and all of Tracy's family and friends." The Sith legend Vince Clarke, 63 years old, has yet, as the time of this recording, comment publicly on the loss. The couple lived together in a sprawling Manhattan home and have an 18-year-old son called Oscar. So tragic news on the heels of Vince Clarke's solo album release a few months back in the passing of his wife. So prayers certainly go out to him and his family with just the absolutely devastating news. 53 and passing away of cancer. Just heartbreaking. So we'll just take a moment before we move on to the next item this week on Depeche Mode, the podcast. In searching for prep for this week's show, I found a rather interesting item, which was going to be the main topic of discussion on this episode. However, overnight, and I'm going to keep it anonymous at the moment, I'm waiting for some further information. I've been talking on the show, because it has been mentioned often, even by the band, that there are 4 fully produced tracks that did not make it on what ended up being the 12-track Memento Mori album. Initially, we were told that those tracks would be released last year, and that clearly didn't happen. And then after the first of the year, news came that more than likely those 4 songs would be released at some point this year. Now, my understanding was that we could get, maybe an EP, but most likely this would be included in some sort of deluxe box set of Memento Mori. When we received this and in what format remained to be seen. I'm now hearing word and further confirmation that is indeed the case. That there will be, and as with all the items that I report on the show, unless it officially comes from the label or the band, this is rumor at this point in time, but I have it on fairly good authority that there will be a deluxe edition of Memento Mori released sometime toward the end of May that will include those 4 unreleased, fully produced tracks. Now, when they say deluxe edition, my speculation at this point, understanding, is that more than likely this will be something along the lines of what we've seen in the past, whether it's the Depeche Mode 101 Deluxe Edition release, or probably a better one to look at, although this more than likely won't be as comprehensive. The Sounds of the Universe, a deluxe box set that they released. This will include those 4 tracks, potentially the remixes, along with Memento Mori in a deluxe box package. The one question that I have is whether or not this will also include the live physical release of the tour potentially being whatever was recorded during the shows in Mexico last year. So that's what I'm wondering, whether or not this deluxe set for Memento Mori will indeed be a fuller box set, and potentially including, say, a documentary like what we've received in the past but haven't over the course of the last few albums, or whether or not this is actually going to be Memento Mori Deluxe that includes the live physical release, the Mexico film or documentary they shot along with those 4 tracks. It makes sense that it's coming out in late May, considering the tour will have officially ended in April. And I made a joke to my friend and friend of the show, Matt, that it makes sense they would release those 4 fully produced tracks after the tour was over. That way they wouldn't have individuals hoping to play those songs live on the tour. I say that jokingly. I don't think that went into the band's calculus. It makes sense to me that they would release this when the tour is done, and that it would potentially include the physical release, and whether or not that's another performance, perhaps one of the performances on this final 4th leg of the tour, or the most likely being those Mexico shows, considering we know that there was something specific that was filmed for those shows. Either way, what I'm being told on a base level is that a deluxe edition of Memento Mori, including those 4 unreleased tracks, will be released sometime in May. I'll tell you what I would really like to see, and I don't see this happening. What I'd really like to see happen, I would love if we got a deluxe edition of Memento Mori, but it was a physical release of the album that includes the 4 tracks placed in order within the album, meaning a reworking of the album of the 12 tracks. And if Dave and Martin got together and decided to retool the album, include it so the whole album is 16 tracks, and specifically place those 4 unproduced songs on the actual album, so we got a longer version of the album, I think that would be awesome. More than likely, we'll get Memento Mori, the regular release, and then those 4 tracks separately. I also expect that we'll get a documentary, considering the amount of video material that we received in the promotion to the run-up of Memento Mori, and how much of a focus there was on the production team of Marta Solongni and Ford. I would be surprised if we didn't get a full-blown making-of documentary like we've received in years past. It's a bummer to me that we didn't get the same type of documentaries after. I know we got a smaller documentary for Playing the Angel, but after that, we didn't get any more of those documentaries. Certainly not for Delta, and certainly not for Spirit. And I was thinking about this further before doing the show. I really think it would help those albums. I know for me personally, if I were able to get more background and detail into the production of, say, Spirit, I think that could help in terms of appreciation for that album, considering that we were told in a few of those interviews that, arguably the band has said that it was one of the most difficult recordings they've ever done. And when you go back and consider how much was made of Songs of Faith and Devotion and the difficulty during that recording process, I'm dying to hear what the production was like for Spirit. I find this quite often when we get documentaries for live-action television shows or movies of films or shows that I just thought were okay, but then when I actually am able to go back and see how it was created, the thought process that went into the decision-making, it brings about a better appreciation for something that I thought was just okay, and I actually end up enjoying it quite a bit more. So I'm excited either way to get these 4 unreleased tracks. Somebody had asked on X whether or not, they matched Memento Mori, and I have no idea. I haven't heard them. I haven't heard those 4 tracks yet. And whether or not they're as good as anything on Memento Mori remains to be seen, because we've had circumstances before, at least in my opinion, where some of the B-sides have been better than some of the album tracks. Because it's all subjective in the end, right? I mean, people argue that the demo versions for the songs that ended up making the cut on Delta Machine were better than what was on Delta Machine. They were certainly a departure. For those that haven't gone and listened to the demos for the songs on Delta Machine, definitely go to YouTube and track those down and give them a listen, because it's fascinating to hear how electronic those songs sounded and how different they sounded compared to what they ended up producing on Delta Machine. So if you have any insight on it, as always, you can email me, talkshownerd@gmail.com, and I will certainly share with you anything else that I happen to find in upcoming episodes. Now let's get to something else rather interesting that I found online this week. So, as I've mentioned many times on the show, typically what I do is, since I do the show weekly, I'll go online and I'll do an internet search for anything relating to Depeche Mode that may have come out over the course of the past week. And a rather interesting item popped up on BluRay.com. The listing was posted earlier this week. Depeche Mode, The World We Live In, and Live in Hamburg, 1984. The first video released by Depeche Mode, featuring almost an entire concert from their 1984 Some Great Reward tour in Hamburg, Germany, on December 14th of 1984. Now, that's all that is listed on BluRay.com. So all that I can tell you is that posting had not been on BluRay.com prior to this week. Now, whether or not that means anything at all, I don't know. I don't know if BluRay.com is one of those websites where random individuals can go and post things like on Wikipedia. I will say they had artwork that was attached to it. It's the artwork that we've all seen from The World We Live In and Live in Hamburg. We received an email from a friend of the show a few weeks back when I was talking about the potential of having that released after my review of Strange and Strange 2 came out on Blu-ray, and they had mentioned how, I believe they said that was shot on video or film, or shot on film, and therefore the original film may not be, it was shot on film, that original film may not be available. What I did find in doing a little bit more research on this is there is a Japanese CD and DVD combo that is still available, an import available. Now, it's a Laserdisc transfer because The World We Live In and Live in Hamburg was released on Laserdisc at one point in time. So, there are obviously masters out there somewhere of that footage. Now, whether or not the original film is still available, probably not. And I don't know how much upscaling could be done from a Laserdisc transfer or the original files relating to that Laserdisc. That being said, you can purchase a Japanese CD-DVD combo that is a Laserdisc transfer of The World We Live In and Live in Hamburg. So it's not completely out of the question that we would get potentially a Blu-ray of that. But the other question that comes into mind among many is, who ends up being in charge of that? It's not like we're going to be able to get the, I would imagine. It's not like Anton Corbijn shot The World We Live In and Live in Hamburg. It was more to my point. So it's not like you're going to be able to find the original director to go in, and if they did have the original film, meticulously go back and handle the transfer like Anton Corbijn did. I just thought it was interesting. I wanted to throw it out there because that listing just recently popped up on BluRay.com, and as I said, it wasn't there before. It's been a long time since I've watched The World We Live In and Live in Hamburg. But as a fan, that would be something that would be amazing to have in as best a quality as possible, just because of the pure nostalgic standpoint of that footage from that show was the first time that I ever saw Depeche Mode live in any format. That's the first time I ever got a glimpse of what a Depeche Mode show could be. And going back and watching some of the clips that are available online, because you can go in and find them, it really is, I don't know what word I want to use, a trip to go back and watch that, especially that young Dave Gahan on stage performing. So I was going back and watching, actually, a few other clips recently, just doing some research for the show, and was noticing some interesting moves that disappeared from, I'd say, like the past 10 years that Dave brought back in terms of his singing style on this tour. I'm not going to go to the lengths of describing what it is I'm talking about, but I thought it was really interesting because I've talked about before on the show just how Dave has morphed as a performer throughout the years, and you can go and look in different eras of Dave. I think for those of us, most of you listening to the show, you know what I'm talking about. If you showed a random clip without anything distinct in the background to differentiate what the stage looks like, most of us could pick out what tour it was, solely based off of, one, how Dave looks, or two, the moves that he's performing up on stage. But I was watching some clips, and I want to say you got to go back to the Exciter tour. And there were some moves that Dave was doing that he hadn't done in the past few tours, and certainly not on the Spirit tour, that he kind of returned back to the spotlight on this tour. I just thought that was interesting and figured I'd add it on the show. As always, I'd love to hear from you. Leave me an email, or drop me an email, talkshownerd@gmail.com. Or you can go and leave a comment up on YouTube if you happen to be listening there. And I want to take just a moment and remind you that if you want to support My Nerd World and Depeche Mode, the podcast, and you enjoy reading and like science fiction, I hope you'll check out the first book in my science fiction space opera series, EMBARK. Treat yourself, a friend, or a family member with science fiction. It's set in the future, with air and space flight culture having replaced car culture. It is inspired in part by Depeche Mode, life in the so-called space age, the world we live in, and life in general. Depeche Mode actually plays a large part in the underlying themes of the story that I wrote. The main character is a massive Depeche Mode fan at a time in the future when the music of the 80s through the 2000s is nostalgic and popular among the characters of the story. If you've read Ready Player One, think about the way that it was handled in that book, and I was inspired to do something very similar in my science fiction story. It features references to Depeche Mode, both direct and indirect, while telling an exciting science fiction space opera saga. In the wake of a catastrophic industrial accident, the collapse of the planet has begun. Amid the growing chaos, Taft Guardia and fellow starfighter pilot Keith Amaro uncover a shocking secret left behind by her late aerospace engineer father. With two rival megacorporations on the brink of interstellar war, Taft and Keitha, with their ragtag crew, test their discovery, mistakenly drawing attention to its power. Now the factions at odds will stop at nothing to obtain the one thing that could thwart their efforts. With Earth's evacuees facing annihilation, can Taft, Keitha, and a brave resistance save humanity before it's too late? Don't miss this fast-paced and action-packed science fiction adventure. Again, if you like science fiction with romance and action and a lot of technology with some Depeche Mode references thrown into the mix, EMBARK is perfect for you. It's written for adults, but it's great for ages 11 plus. In terms of the content, nothing explicit, no language. Think Star Wars in terms of the violence. Pick up EMBARK Book 1 today. Available in hardcover, paperback, audiobook, ebook, and Kindle Unlimited. You can get the ebook right now for just $2.99 on Amazon.com or mynerdworld.net. And if you want to support My Nerd World and what I do here on the podcast, I hope you'll go and pick up your preferred version of the book. And you can purchase hardcovers and paperbacks directly from me. I'll autograph them too, get them in the mail. Incredibly cheap shipping. Just email me, talkshownerd@gmail.com, and I'll give you all of the details. I can't tell you how much fun it is when I put out a new show and suddenly I get a bump in sales. So head on over to Amazon.com or mynerdworld.net today. All right, let's get to your listener feedback, and thank you to everybody who writes into the show. First, to Amy in Worcestershire writes, Happy New Year to you. I'm glad you had a great break. Thanks again for another thought-provoking podcast this week. Your comments off the back of Andrea's email about the excitement of discovering DM really resonated with me, having arrived a bit late to the party myself. That's more than a party. See what I did there? It's definitely a lot of fun. I was also apt, given the discussion about the availability of physical media and the output to further my DM education. Like you, I much prefer a CD to having to subscribe to a streaming platform or something digital. However, tracking down some of DM's back catalog has been proving tricky, having been marginally outbid on the deluxe CD/DVD of Songs of Faith and Devotion via a popular e-auction platform. I questioned why some of these classics aren't still available to buy new. Okay, it's only a couple of albums, but frustrating nonetheless. Less than 20 days now to the concert in Birmingham. Not that I'm counting or anything. Happy 2024 to you and all the friends of the show. On and roll on a Memento Mori Deluxe edition, Amy in Worcestershire. I wish that, so, like I mentioned in promoting my science fiction space opera series, my hardcovers and paperbacks, they're printed on demand. I self-publish through My Nerd World Books. It's just what I call it. And typically, they'll have some in stock depending on the number of books that I'm selling. But a lot of times, they just print those up on demand. And I wish that we had something similar with physical media. I know the reason why we can't get a lot of these back items on physical releases because it's not cost effective to print a bunch of them up, produce a bunch of them if they're not going to sell enough to, make up for the amount that they've gone and produced. I just wish that there was a way that a label could produce these on demand, especially when it comes to the singles released for the recent albums. Because I'd love to be able to complete the entire collection of singles on disc to match what I have collected throughout the years of the previous DM albums. But alas, maybe somebody will hear this and have the idea and give us the opportunity to go and do that. That would be fantastic. All right, now we hear from friend of the show, Howard Temple, talking about Depeche Mode. While I can't claim to be a super fan, they are one of my favorites, as I only have a few artists where I own more than 4 albums. Best of albums don't count. Violator is still my favorite, since that is where I really got into Depeche Mode my senior year. Parentheses, nostalgia. By the way, that track, Nostalgia, with Dave Gahan on vocals by Mirror, if you have never heard that before, finish the show, then go find it. Mirror, Dave Gahan, Nostalgia. One of my all-time favorite non-Depeche Mode Dave Gahan vocals. Yes, even including everything that he's done solo. Nostalgia is just a fantastic song. One of my favorite songs by Dave, the solo songs by him are, Saw Something? Oh, I love that song. I believe that's the title, right? If I'm getting that wrong, I don't feel too bad. It's Dave's solo work. But I saw something in your eyes, I'm sure. Anyway, Memento Mori is now my second favorite TM album. I apologize for that. That was horrible. And I wasn't really trying hard, but be that as it may. My favorite Stranger and Before We Drown have really resonated with my situation lately. No, I didn't attend the concert at T-Mobile Arena. Between the holidays and saving up for a trip with my son, we have decided where disposable income goes. Although my wife spends enough on plays at the Smiths Center here, she wouldn't have objected. But for the price of just me going in the nosebleed section, I could have gotten a VIP table for my wife and I at the Las Vegas Hard Rock, seeing the DM tribute band Strangelove, the Depeche Mode Experience. And to have a tribute band that's been around for over 10 years speaks to just how good Depeche Mode is and how people just can't get enough. But I've seen a few video clips from several of the concerts, and I wish I would have gone. Oh well, c'est la vie. My final DM thought, I'm wondering if Caroline's Train was the one coming for us to get on board. I see what you did there. Side note, I'm also loving the new Gunship album. Yeah, man, again, I don't talk about other bands that often on the show, but that Gunship album, Unicorn, is just, I adore that album. All right, thank you, Howard, and I hope you're doing well. All right, friend of the show, Jason, writes in, I'm back from almost a 2-week digital detox. No emails sent apart from a few thank yous. And clearing my inbox of daily Black Friday and Christmas sales offers. Predicted DM releases for this year. The final 12-inch box sets I predict Heroes will feature in the release for Spirit, and possibly as a single-sided 7-inch. The unreleased new songs will either drop to coincide with the start of the final leg of the tour or the end of it. If they don't, then they will probably be a part of a Memento Mori 12-inch box set, so we better start saving in case, or to promote yet another greatest hits album later in the year. There will be 1 or 2 other songs appearing on the set list for the final leg. I've got a feeling they will possibly be the proper version of Shake the Disease as an alternative for Black Celebration, Behind the Wheel as an alternative to Policy of Truth, and Death's Door, interesting, as part of Martin's slot as Jason does his predictions for this year. The 3 Cologne shows will be filmed for a future release. And I think we may get something new from Alan Wilder this year. Although some fans say he's done with the music industry, it seems strange his recording studio was not included as part of the house sale as he was keeping it. There's a great interview with Vince Clarke and Daniel Miller on Mute's channel on YouTube. And in addition to discussing Vince's new solo album, they also reminisce about the early days. And Daniel mentioned how he ended up with Depeche Mode coming to Mute. In short, it was a trade-off with another label owner who ended up with Soft Cell, a story I can't recount hearing before. I believe that was actually brought up, and the first time that I had heard that too, on the Shameless podcast last year. But not as good a story I heard from Martin, and forgive me if I forget the full details. In essence, the band nearly ended up moving to Africa, I think, to play cover versions dressed up as Doctor Who instead of going with Mute. On your point of physical releases, I'm a big fan of physical media format, and will choose that over digital for music and films, as it means I'm not dependent on the internet to access the content, or a company wiping the content from a user's account, something that recently happened with Sony wiping a whole load of purchased Disney content from PlayStation owners' accounts due to licensing changes. Yeah, I heard about that. Just awful. Regards, Jason. Thank you, Jason, as always. We'll see. We'll see if all these predictions come true, and especially, as I mentioned in the show's details, this deluxe set for Memento Mori and those 4 unreleased tracks towards the end of May. Daniel Thoman writes this: what is your least loved song on Memento Mori? I like the way you worded that. Mine is Caroline's Monkey, a song that is one of the least favorite songs of DM. However, on the album, there's one of the best songs ever produced by DM, Always You. So, I've been sitting on this question of my least loved song on Memento Mori since you posted this shortly after last week's episode. And I was wrestling with 2 songs and then landed on a different song. So the 2 songs that I was wrestling with was Caroline's Monkey and Wagging Tongue. I was thinking this more along the lines of which song would I get rid of off the album. But going back to the way that you questioned it, offered up a different perspective, because it's hard to pitch off one or the other. My least loved song on the album is Never Let Me Go. I love all the songs on the album, but that's the one that probably I least enjoy. Originally, it would have been Wagging Tongue, but I've come back around on Wagging Tongue. And I don't know if I've ever mentioned this on the show, to be honest with you. The biggest issue that I have with Wagging Tongue is just the title and starting off of the song with the lyric, Wagging Tongue. I don't know what it is about Depeche Mode and tongues, but it just doesn't sit well with me. Maybe it goes back to that ridiculous video for Hole to Feed. I wasn't a big fan of that song either, but that video was just ghastly. And for some reason, with Wagging Tongue, the title never sat well with me. The opening lyric and the way that Dave kind of sings it doesn't sit right, but the song itself is really good. And I like its brevity. If it had gone on like another 30 seconds longer, I probably would skip it more often, but I really like the instrumentation. It's just that one aspect of it. Caroline's Monkey is a weird one for me. I really enjoyed that song. I'm not going to lie, though. I have a bit of an issue knowing that Richard Butler had a hand in writing it, and it doesn't come off like a typical Depeche Mode song lyrically, at least for me. So I enjoy the song. It's got a beat that reminds me a bit of Policy of Truth. I never skip over it, but there's something in the back of my head, and I'm way overthinking this, but we as Depeche Mode fans never do that, right? There's something in the back of my head that goes, this wasn't 100% Depeche. Now, you can say the same thing about the other songs that Richard Butler co-wrote, and you could definitely make that argument as it relates to Ghosts Again. That being said, I adore Ghosts Again. One of my favorite singles is Enjoy the Silence. There's just like so many Depeche Mode songs, no burn on that. But Ghosts Again is right up there with me is right up there with Enjoy the Silence for me. So, again, least loved song on the album. While I still enjoy it, it's never let me go. Thank you, Daniel, for the question. It was incredibly thought-provoking if you hadn't figured that out yet. To the show. All right, let's go here. Stephanie writes, you asked for a debate about the uniqueness of Depeche Mode, and I admire that uniqueness. It's their music. It's their high recognition value, and yet you can hear developments. Maybe it's just me, but I like listening to Never Let Me Down Again just as much as My Perfect Stranger. May all OMD fans forgive me now, but I recently heard their new album and spontaneously said they still sound like they did in the 80s. Depeche Mode sound like Depeche Mode, but not like any time period. They have moved with the times and allowed other influences without losing their style. I think that's what makes them unique. And of course, we unique fans, bands can claim to have accompanied lives for more than 40 years. That's it from me. Best wishes from the Baltic coast, Stephanie. Thank you, as always, Stephanie. It's great to hear from you, and I hope you're having a fantastic new year as well. All right, two more quick ones. Modehead 101 says, it's so bizarre that Before We Drown wasn't a single and that the band didn't perform it live. Completely agree. Actually, the one song that I think is a travesty that wasn't released as a single is People Are Good. That song is such a banger, man. I was listening to it on the drive home today, and I was reminding myself that I was missing out because I don't listen to that song nearly as much as I should, but that song is so good, and it's a crime that it wasn't performed live, and that should have been a single as well. Thank you, Modehead 101. You're also friends of the show, as is Stephanie and David Hudson, who writes, Don't Say You Love Me needs to be the opening theme of the next Bond movie. Yeah, I can see that. Actually, I agree with you, and that's one of my favorite songs on Memento Mori, but Soul With Me, in my opinion, is actually more Bond-like than Don't Say You Love Me. But it's all subjective, right? Thank you so much for checking out this week's episode. I really do appreciate it. I'll be back again next week. Again, prayers out to Vince Clarke and his family over their tragic loss. I was sad to hear that news. Thank you again for checking out the show. If you want to email, TalkShowNerd@gmail.com. Again, I hope if you enjoy reading science fiction, you'll take a moment and pick up book 1 in my science fiction space opera series. I greatly appreciate it. Looking forward to your listener feedback between now and next week. And I hope wherever you are happy, you're healthy, and you're safe. I'll talk to you then. Bye.
Hello, this is Martin Gore from Depeche Mode.
Hi, this is Dave Gahan from Depeche Mode, and you are listening to
My Nerd World.